I'm fond of this book, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, Time Management for Mortals. And the whole idea of that the average lifespan is 4,000 weeks, which is not that long. It's a kind of productivity, anti-productivity book, and the key idea is, how do you get everything done? You can't. It's impossible. The demands on you are always going to be larger than the time allotted to you, and therefore you have to triage. And I think one thing that you can use death for in order to triage your obligations is to think about the contemplation of death on analogy to, say, checking your bank account. You probably shouldn't do it like every minute of every day. It's probably not that fun to do. But before you go on trips or decide to do big expenditures, you look and see, do I have what's in me here in order to make this purchase? So I don't often make every decision that I make in light of the fact that I'm going to die, but I increasingly want to cultivate the virtue of the habit of making decisions on the basis of the fact that others are going to die eventually. So let me just do some real hard math with you here. Let's say you're 20 years old on average. Let's say your parents are about the average when they had you. Let's say they're 50 years old. Let's say they live until they're 80 years old. You got 30 years left with your parents. That might sound amazing, right? But let's say that you're not going to move back home after you graduate. So you're going to have them like 4-8 weeks with them during your breaks and the remaining of your time. And then you're going to see them on average 2 weeks a year for the rest of your life. That means 60 weeks you have with your parents. That's about a year. In total, you have 1 year left with your parents of actual face-to-face interaction. Now, you can say, is that a price you want to pay? If not, are there jobs you can do back in your hometown? Can you look for remote work? Can you change your major to give you more flexibility, et cetera? So when you come to think about death like that, then I do think it begins significantly to modulate certain of your decisions, and you begin to optimize something other than efficiency, career, advancement, et cetera. Without any kind of roadblocks, it's probably the case that you will go on taking increasingly more prestigious and sophisticated and well-paying versions of your jobs, and you'll think that's something like a proxy for success. And I want to encourage you to maybe cultivate the goal of not taking the highest paid, highest prestigious job that becomes available for you to you. Because my suspicion is that you're going to pay for that in other ways. And one of the ways you might pay for it is with time. So Daniel Markovits, a professor at Yale Law, has a book about the meritocracy. And what's interesting about this book is he says the meritocracy is not only working for those who lose the meritocracy, it's not working for the winners. And the reason is that they have too much work. So you might have already realized this. If you haven't, it'll come very shortly. The reward for being good and doing a lot of work is people give you more work. And it'll just keep going on like that. So maybe you want to say, I'm in something like a rat race here, and the rat race is not befitting the dignity of my humanity, nor that of people around me that I care about very deeply. We only have 4,000 weeks. And therefore, it's something like a finite resource that we have to triage in the right direction. So I think cases like that one, thinking about how much your parents have left, which again, that might be well more than many of you have. I'm aware that many of your parents might be already passed. Thinking about it like a budget, I think, makes you begin to say that I have to make trade-offs in my life, and I might not be able to pursue everything I wanted to.
Yeah, if I can just jump in and react to some of that, because I'm in almost total agreement with you.
Okay, good, all right.
So one takeaway is after tonight, when you go back to your dorm room, call your mother, because she's waiting to hear from you, and you don't talk to your parents nearly as often as you should. That's as a parent, I want to just make that clear. Number two, I completely agree that I think people sometimes say, death should shape, the fact of our mortality should shape how we're going to live. There's a quote from Kafka, I'll probably bungle, but it's something like, the meaning of life is that it ends. And you think, oh, this sounds profound in that kind of Kafkaesque way. Don't quite know what it means, but it sounds like it's saying something really profound. But the suggestion is, this is going to tell you, focusing on the fact that you're going to die is going to tell you how to live. I think the only thing that focusing on your death is going to tell you is the point that Justin was just making, that you don't have much time. It's a very difficult thought to take seriously when you're, your age, when you're in your 20s, let's say, early 20s. It doesn't take a whole lot more time beyond that when you begin to feel, oh yeah, it's not an open-ended thing, but by the time, I mean, think about what a midlife crisis is. You know, a midlife crisis is somebody who set goals, you know, when they're your age, and then achieve those goals. They've made it to the top of the corporate ladder or whatever it was, you know, and they're 40 or maybe they're 50, and now they look at it and they say, is this what it was all about? Is this what was worth doing with my time? They come away thinking that the aims that they set themselves that seemed so shiny and attractive, it's like fool's gold. It was shiny and attractive, but it wasn't the real thing. And so the real takeaway about thinking about our mortality is how very little time we actually have. And so don't squander it. Think hard now at the beginning stages about what's genuinely worth doing. And again, I'm just in complete agreement. I'll say something about this as well. That, I mean, there are these studies, and like anything else in the social sciences, you get contested, you get other studies, and it's always hard to know how to interpret it, that suggests, unsurprisingly, if you're poor, you're not very satisfied with your life. And so, of course, if you have more money, then you're more satisfied. But it's just not true that more and more money makes you more and more satisfied. The curve just, you know, bends over. And so at a certain point, you say, yeah, that's enough. More money is not the thing that's going to add more satisfaction or more value or more meaning in my life. And I guess as these words come out of my mouth, I find myself wanting to say, and although I'm talking in terms of satisfaction and meaning, I don't mean that these questions should be of a purely egoistic sort. You know, what's in it for me? One of the things that's important to do with our lives is make other people's lives better or help produce conditions in which other people can have valuable and meaningful lives. That's itself one of the most important sources of meaning in your own life. But even if that wasn't true, there'd still be reason to devote your attention to making other lives better as well.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question about this? So we're agreed that the one thing that time, mortality, death can give you is something like this triaging of obligations. Yeah. So let me ask you about this. I think it's a corollary of that, but I wonder what you think. So Marcus Aurelius has this line, not long now, and you will be dust, and the ones who carry you away will be mourned by another. And I love this sentence because it sounds like it's going to end with, you'll be dust and people will mourn you. But in fact, by the end of the sentence, your death is not even the main topic anymore. Very soon you'll be death, and the ones who bear you away, the pallbearers, will be mourned by another. So you're not even the last person who's dead in the sentence, right? And he gave himself this catechesis, I think, in order to remove his grasp from what he considered to be the trivialities of life. Now, he might have thought that everything in life was a triviality. Sometimes he would say, for all your fame, think about the many regions of the world in which no one knows you, and think how very quickly after your death, no one will remember your name. Now, maybe this is a temptation toward nihilism, but I wonder if you think that disciplines like these might help wean your affections away from things that might be trivial. I mean, maybe the best thing that happened to you in the next few weeks is that you become Columbia's valedictorian. Name me Columbia's valedictorian from 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 9 years ago, 8 years ago. Very soon they'll forget your name. So does thinking about death wean your affections away from trivialities?